Maybe if I become a senator, maybe I'll be able to speak to the guy. I mean, he doesn't listen to me now. He probably doesn't even know I exist. But if I'm a senator, I mean, he'll know that I'm there. And maybe something that I say will make sense. Maybe I can influence him.
Okay. Well, I have a couple more questions if you have time.
All right, what do you got?
Well, okay. If you want to, you're getting good stuff here. Okay, I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I had a factory in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, hiring 25 people. And, of course, the economy and everything about our government is not friendly for small businesses, and it's not friendly for manufacturing. So I have a question for you, and that is, what would you bring? What would you do to bring back manufacturing to the United States?
Well, what I want to do, number one, is make government as small as possible so that we can lower taxes so that businesses, including manufacturers, don't have to pay as much taxes to the government. But I also want to repeal all the cumbersome and burdensome regulations that have been layered on business for years. And I also want to make it more difficult for people to sue people. One of the biggest problems when you start a business is legal bills and frivolous lawsuits from employees. And, they've made it so easy and so inexpensive for people to sue their employers that it runs up the cost of employment and discourages it. So we need tort reform, litigation reform. There are a lot of labor laws that have been passed that are actually, weakening the economy. And so we need to repeal a lot of them so that we can effectively employ people once again and produce things again. We need to manufacture, and we also have to allow interest rates to rise. We can't keep subsidizing Wall Street and financial services. Finance is now 50% of our GDP. That can't be. It has to be allowed to shrink because there is no money, there's no capital for manufacturing. It's all being diverted to Wall Street. We have to allow rates to rise so that the speculators don't get all the money. We need real businesses borrowing money because they can make a real meaningful return based on acquiring productive assets. Wall Street needs cheap money because they gamble with it and they lever it all up. But when they borrow all the money, there is no money to finance industry. And we need that. But if we can make government small enough, if we can repeal enough rules and regulations, we have plenty of people unemployed, right? We got plenty of people we can put to work. We don't have a shortage of labor. So we can do it.
But there's two other problems in there, and that one of them is labor and the unions.
Well,
We have a major problem with that. And secondly, my biggest problem as a manufacturer and a business person was my competition with China. I could not compete with China. The people in China are working for next to nothing, and the regulations that that the unions put on us in order, and I didn't even have a union shop.
That's got to stop. That's got to stop.
What do we do to compete with China? How can we get those dollars away from China?
We used to compete.
And what do we do? Because China, can we regulate China? Would you be in favor of regulating trade with China or what?
China was a poorer country 20 years ago with even lower wages than they have now, and it wasn't a problem. Countries like Japan and Germany, which pay higher wages than we do, have surpluses with China. So we can compete with China. We just can't compete with them with a giant government on our back because they're rendering us uncompetitive. If we repeal enough rules and regulations and lower taxes so that we can level the playing field, we can compete. But it's going to take a while. Unfortunately, for the last 10 years, China has invested in their manufacturing base, in their infrastructure. We haven't. We spent our money on products. We squandered our money. So we have a lot of catching up to do. We had a huge lead on the rest of the world, and we blew it. Right? We blew it because the government got too big, and we got complacent, and we got lazy, and we became a nation of consumers and gamblers and borrowers instead of the nation of thrifty savers and producers and entrepreneurs that we used to be when government was small. And so we have to turn back the clock. And we can do it. I mean, we could come back. I mean, think about the fact that Germany and Japan...
It's colossal. What you're talking about it's a beautiful ideal, and I agree with you, but practically speaking, I mean, nobody's going to be in business waiting for this to happen because you can't sustain it. I mean, a small business, and that brings me to my next question, which is actually, what could you do to help small businesses in a real way? Not in a pretend way, but in a real way.
No, the real way is to remove all the government obstacles from their path. I mean, I don't like the fact, 100 years ago, if you wanted to set up a small business, you just did it. You didn't have all these forms, all these licenses, all this record keeping, all the things you had to keep track of, all the different things that the government forces you to do to allow you to stay in business. Why do we want to do that? Why do we want to make it so difficult and so hard for people to start businesses and to grow their businesses? I mean, we have some of the most foolish regulations. A lot of the regulations that we have, you hit them as you have more employees. So if you have fewer than 5 employees, you don't have to abide by these rules. But the minute you get 5, now you're subject.
We were being held to the same standards that some of the major corporations were being held to. And we were a small business with 25 employees. I mean, we were just growing. There was no way we could compete.
Yeah.
And we were making a beautiful product. And the whole area in New York that used to have about 200,000 employees working in the garment trade, now I think there's less than 10,000.
I know, look, all the industries. You can look at what's happened to the state of Connecticut. All the industries that we had, are gone. And all that's left is the services. But the services are unsustainable without the products. But we're only getting the products because we're borrowing money to pay for them. But we can't pay the money back.
How are you going to convince people not to shop at Walmart and all those
I
places?
won't have to convince them. When the government stops subsidizing it, they won't be able to afford it. When interest rates go up, when the government isn't propping up the banks, the credit card industry is going to stop. People aren't going to be able to. When mortgage, it's the only reason people are living beyond their means is because the government is making it possible.
And all the people are the people that are working for their dollar. Half of it goes to the government. The other, at least 2/3 of it, goes to China directly because they're buying things. I mean, go look at anything probably that you're wearing right now. What you are wearing right now is probably every single piece of it was made in China.
Well, I know. Well, almost everything I own is made someplace else. I've told people, for fun, as a joke, find something in your house that was made in America. It ain't easy to do.
Yeah.
And people, just try to go to a store. Try to buy something.
Even you yourself were saying that you invest outside of this country.
Of course. Because that's where I have to invest.
Yeah.
Because the returns are better abroad. Because the taxes are lower. Because the regulations are lower. Because the monetary policy is sound.
Sneak out for fresh air, guys.
So that's it. But I want to change it. See, if I go to Washington and change the policies, then maybe investing in America will be a good thing again. Investing in American businesses, because the government will leave them alone. And if we can have sound money, if the government stops debasing our money, then we can have confidence in investment returns. But if they're just going to print money, then how do you have any confidence in what it's going to be worth in the future? When you're investing, it's all about the future. What are the returns worth in the future? And if the government takes those returns through inflation or through higher taxes, there's no reason to invest. We're chasing the capital out of the country. And I said the next thing we're going to chase out is the labor. Because once the capital's gone, the labor follows. Because without capital, there's no workers.
I mean, they're not.
And that's it. That's going to happen. Our kids are going to move to other countries unless we stop.
So the last question that I had was, what can you do in a real way to create and to bring back new jobs?
Well, so government can't do anything to bring back new jobs. As a private businessman, I can create jobs. As a bureaucrat, as somebody in Washington, what I want to do is prevent Washington from interfering with businesses' ability to create jobs. So if there are fewer regulations and fewer taxes, then there will be more jobs because it won't be as expensive to produce them. And we want the people who create jobs, who take a risk, to be rewarded for what they've done. There has to be a carrot to go with that stick. That if you put yourself out there and you start a business and you run all the risks that it could fail, and when you run a business and you employ people, they get their salaries. You promise to pay them salary. You might not make anything, right? You might lose money, right? And so to take that risk, to do that, you need to be able to be rewarded. And the more rewards there are, the more people that are going to take that risk. And and the harder we make it for people to start businesses, the fewer people will start them. The harder we make it to expand, the fewer businesses will grow. So we have to understand all the things that the government does, and I want to go undo all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just went to open a small business account yesterday in a bank, and oh my God, I had to go to 3 banks before I didn't have to go through so much red tape. And I ended up
all that is because of the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act. You opening up a bank account is the government just makes everything complicated that should be simple. And why is that? I mean, they're deliberately legislating inefficiency. And no, I want the efficiencies of a free market. I don't want the clumsy bureaucracy of central government planning. But that's what we've got. We're turning the country into the Soviet Union.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck.
Well, thank you. It's nice to meet you.
I appreciate you answering those questions for me,
Sure.
and if I can do anything to help
Well,
you.
volunteer. Go down.
What do I need
contact.
to do?
Talk to.
Volunteer to help you. Okay.
Come down.
All right.
Yeah, I think you'd be a good volunteer. You got some energy, and
Well, I have a lot of passion for it.
Yeah.
I mean, this country is in such. I have one, but I'll take it.
Okay.
The country's in such need, and we need smart people.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Well,
I
thank
appreciate
you. Well,
your
if you help
time.
me, maybe I can get there.
Well, I'll do everything